to prepare properly for Salah and not just a speedy wudu. And the Prophet ﷺ also taught us that if he wasn't to put a hardship on the ummah, he would have commanded them to use a miswak for every wudu, or in another narration for every Salah. So we see here that the person using miswak, doing wudu properly, repeating what the mu'adhin says, coming early to Salah, all in preparation. By that time, the person would probably be right behind the imam and get a very important spot and a very important time where he can prepare himself to concentrate. We should aim in our Salah to get the entire reward. That a person shouldn't be happy with 1/10 of their Salah, but they should go for the full reward of this Salah. Abu Bakr ibn Iyash, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, I saw Habib ibn Thabit in sujood. He said, I saw Habib ibn Thabit in sujood, and he said, if you saw him in sujood, you would think that he was dead because of his concentration in that sujood. You would think that he had frozen, he had become frozen in that sujood. Thirdly, we should contemplate the ayat and the adhkar that are being recited in the Salah. And you should think about every ayah that you're reciting. And it's sad and disheartening that you'll see many people, if you ask them, what are you studying in the university? Most people are studying computers, or that's the thing to go into, and I'm sure there's people studying other things. But the people, if you ask them about Cobalt or A++, they have manuals this big, manual after manual. They understand the language of pluses and minuses. But when it comes to the Quran, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, they may live their life 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, and they still don't understand what Surah Al-Fatiha means. Even though they may read it, how many times? Maybe 17 times in a day. But they'll please with themselves, or they let it go that they don't understand what these verses are meaning. Or when a person comes up, Sami Allahu liman hamida, when the person gets up from a ruku', he may live his entire life and never know what Sami Allahu liman hamida means. And all it takes is just a question, brother, what does Sami Allahu liman hamida mean? And the person knows the answer. It may take a click on the internet to find the translation of these things and learn about their salah that they're doing every day. But the person just becomes negligent of this and lets life slip away and just lets the river pass them by. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنِ, that won't they contemplate the Quran? For the Quran wasn't meant as some ritual that a person just recites without understanding, but it's meant for the person's contemplation and to live the Quran. And in another verse Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كِتَابٌ أَنزَلْنَاهُ إِلَيْكَ مُبَارَكٌ, that a book that we revealed down to you, mubarakun, blessed. And indeed many people are reading it for blessings, and the Quran is mubarak. But it doesn't end there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then teaches us why He sent down this blessed book. كِتَابٌ أَنزَلْنَاهُ إِلَيْكَ مُبَارَكٌ لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ, so that its verses would be contemplated. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says why this blessed book was revealed down, so that its verses would be contemplated and implemented. We should pray in congregation. We see this is a very serious matter coming in the Sunnah. And you'll see something like the Prophet ﷺ, like we just said about the miswak, that not to put a burden on the ummah, that he would have commanded them to use the miswak at every salah. On the other side, when the Prophet ﷺ puts an order, and he is the merciful, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes them as a mercy to humanity. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that I wish that I could get someone else to lead the prayer. I wish that I could get someone so that he could do a mission. And he said, then I would go to those houses of those people who do not come to pray in congregation, do not come to the masjid for salah, and then I would burn down their houses upon them. Compare this to the verses that talk about the mercy of the Prophet ﷺ. If he was going to do something such as this, then how serious is the matter? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, and this is for the men coming to the congregation, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ, to establish the prayer, وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةِ, and give the zakah and pay the zakah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَارْكَعُوا مَعَ الرَّاكِعِينَ, and do ruku', do the bowing with those who do bowing. with those who do ruku'. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already said, establish the salah, pay the zakah. And how should you do that salah? You should do ruku' with those people who do ruku'. Meaning in the masjid, praying with the congregation. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't command us to pray by ourselves, but that we should pray in the congregation. And we shouldn't miss, we learn from the sunnah that we shouldn't miss our nafil salah. The sunnahs that come before the salahs and after. They're like the fortress for the person. Some people will pray their 4 rak'ah and then just go away with that. But when those sunnah, if a person just held tightly to his sunnah prayers, you can imagine that he would never lose his fard. If a person was so dedicated to his sunnah before, his sunnah after, he would never lose the fard. He would be protected in between. But when a person drops those sunnah prayers, and these are called sunnah mu'akkada, things the Prophet ﷺ never gave up. Sunnah mu'akkada, mu'akkad, that it's, that there's emphasis, that he never missed these. Even if he was traveling, he would never miss his witr salah, his witr sunnahs. And if he was traveling, he would never miss the 2 rak'ahs of fajr, such as this. We should not speed up our salah, and we should pay attention to what we're doing in the salah. Ibn Wahb, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, I saw Sufyan al-Thawri, rahimahullah ta'ala, at the Kaaba, and after Maghrib, he got up to pray 2 rak'ahs. And he says, Wallahi, by the time the adhan came for Isha, Sufyan al-Thawri hadn't finished his first rak'ah in those 2 rak'ahs. And he had prayed from Maghrib till Isha, just concentrating on that 1 rak'ah. We should remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds to us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will continue to listen to us so long as our heart is focused on Allah. If our heart turns away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah has no need to further pay attention to that person's dua, if the person's heart is away. As the Prophet ﷺ showed us in a hadith, and also the other hadith is where the Prophet ﷺ said, when the person stands up for a prayer, in a hadith Qudsi, when the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, قَسَمْتُ الصَّلَاةُ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَ عَبْدِ نِصْفَيْنِ وَلِعَبْدِ مَا سَأَلَ, that I divided the salah into 2 parts, and between me and my slave, and to my slave is what he asks for. And then as the hadith continues, that when the slave says, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Hamadani Abdi, that my slave has praised me. If a person concentrates, if you go back to this hadith and concentrate on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying back to you, you'll pay attention to what you're saying in Surah Al-Fatiha. We should pray with a barrier, a sutra. The Prophet ﷺ taught us that if you pray, that you should put a sutra and draw near to it. Meaning that when a person tries crossing in front of you, there should be something in front, such as a chair, or maybe you're praying behind someone. And then if someone tries passing, the Prophet ﷺ said that he should fight them, or put your hand out like this, so that when the person's crossing, that he doesn't disrupt your salah. Some people may pray at the back of the masjid with a complete open area, and you can imagine how away that is from concentration, as opposed to someone who draws closer, finds himself a sutra, and prays and makes sure no one goes in front of him. We should seek refuge from the shaitan when we go for our salah. As the Prophet ﷺ said, that there's a devil, or by the name of Khanzab, that comes to the people during their salah to distract them from the salah. And the Prophet ﷺ told us that if he comes to you, you should turn to your left side with your head and spit thrice with dry spittle, such as this, such as that, and say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. I seek refuge in Allah from shaitan, the outcast. And this is when a person has whispers, this is what they should do, as taught to us by the Prophet ﷺ. And in conclusion, when we get up for salah, we should pray as if it's our last prayer. As Abu Bakr al-Muzani, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, if you want your prayer, and this is taking from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when he said, Sallu salat muwadda, or Salli salat muwadda, pray as if it's your farewell prayer. Abu Bakr al-Muzani, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, if you want your salah to benefit you, if you want it to have benefit in this life and the hereafter, فَقُلْ, then say, لَا أُصَلِّ بَعْدَهَا, that I'll never be able to pray another prayer after this. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم اغفر لحينا وميتنا وشاهدنا وغائبنا وصغيرنا وكبيرنا وذكرنا وأنثانا اللهم من أحيته منا فأحيا على الإسلام ومن توفيته منا فتوفوا على الإيمان إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون فاذكروا الله العظيم يذكركم واشكروه على نعمه يزدكم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون